All right, guys, after a couple of episodes on tangents, I am back to my bread and butter, back to something I know more about, back to the Devil's Details rules. So this will be Devil's Details 11, the 2 times a week rule. And to review, the last couple, we're going over one, my nemesis, the thruster, and the one before that, the Magnificent 9, the 9 kind of human movement patterns that I want to make sure we're hitting regularly in class. This is similar to that one, but a little more specific to CrossFit type movements. And full disclosure, I borrowed this rule and made it my own from Bill Grundler, who I heard it from. And that leads me to the point of, as I've been doing this with you guys, I think you know this, is anything you get better and more proficient at, you start to make it more simple. You can simplify it, make it more understandable both for yourself and others better, because you have a really good grasp of it. And when I started programming way back in the days, I had notes all over the place and different spreadsheets and all kind of stuff. As recent as 2 years ago, I probably had 40 rules. Now, for the last, I'd say 2 years or so, I'm down to 21, maybe a little less than 2 years, but around that. In a year, I might be down to 15. I don't know, I kind of like 21. It's the ultimate kind of CrossFit number. There's some of these already I think I could condense, but I don't really want to. So I may stay here, but either way, the initial rule I had for this 2 time a week rule was more verbose, kind of messier. And then I heard this from Bill and I'm like, yep, that's it. That's what I'm trying to do with this one. So making it more succinct. So this is in regards to movements I want to make sure we hit 2 times a week and what those are. General, what are things you should do 2 times a week? Well, you should probably bathe at least 2 times a week. Call your mom. I don't think I call my mom on average 2 times a week. Spend quality time with your significant other. That's a good thing to do 2 times a week. In regards to CrossFit, let's get right into it. Going overhead. So that would be any kind of press, push jerk. I would include handstand push-ups in this category. Any movement where your arms end up locked out overhead against resistance. That would be the first 2 times a week rule. The second one would be getting below parallel. Any kind of squatting movement. So air squat, back squat, front squat, overhead squat, wall balls, the ballistic squat jumps we do, all that kind of stuff I would put in the get below parallel category. There would be pull or hip hinges off the ground. So deadlifts, power cleans, power snatch. Again, all these can be done with dumbbells, kettlebells, barbells, any item. It is more the movement that is happening there. So any of those pulls off the ground, hip hinging off the ground. Next would be gymnastics pulling. So this would be pull-ups, toes to bar, knees to elbows, rope climbs. There's going to be a little redundancy and overlap here. As you see, I get a little further into this in just a second. But any kind of thing where you're hanging off something and having to pull, gravity's trying to pull you back to the floor and you are resisting that in some way. Then there is hip hinging off from the hang position, off the ground, hip hinging or pulling. So what I mean by that is now all the hanging movements. Power snatch, hang power snatch, hang power clean, kettlebell swings, kettlebell snatches, all that kind of stuff where you're hip hinging too, but you're not coming from the ground, you're coming from, somewhere above the ground at any rate. Midline work. So now this is what we would call core work, but both front and back. So, okay, now our classic sit-ups, planks, like today, V-ups, GHD sit-ups. This is where there's overlap with toes to bar, knees to elbows would fit into this category too. I would also put like GHD back and hip extensions. Good mornings would fit in this category. So all that work that's working the middle of our torso type of area. And then lastly, monostructural. So monostructural being the running, rowing, biking, skiing. Burpees can be used kind of in this area. I wouldn't put them classically in this area, but you can almost use them that way. But all the cardio stuff, the machines we use, or running down the road, that kind of thing. So those are the 7 different categories of my making sure we hit stuff 2 times a week. Can there be too much of these? For sure. Almost anything there can be too much of. What can there not be too much of? Well, specific to this, monostructural, so the running, rowing, biking, I think you can be a lazy programmer by including too much monostructural, but there's not usually going to be a whole lot of damage. It's just diminishing the efficiency and effect of the program. In life in general, there's several things I don't think you can have too much of. Hats, you can't have too many hats. Janelle strongly disagrees with me on that. Cheese, you can't have too much cheese. I get that honestly from my dad, though I'm not as discriminating as him. I love all kinds of cheese. I will take any of them. And then this rule, John and I took from Joe Abercrombie's character, the Bloody Nine, from his First Law series. You can't have too many knives. And that is one I have really learned to believe in as well. And that does lead me to my second book recommendation. Joe Abercrombie writes fantasy novels, kind of like stuff with castles and sword fighting, and there's a wizard, but it's kind of a darker tinge to that. Kind of like, I'm going to really nerd out here for a second, but if you've ever read Tolkien, the Lord of the Rings series, seen those movies, it's kind of like the main character, if Aragorn was also a psychopathic killer at times, or if Gandalf the Wizard was also a megalomaniac that just viewed people as pawns in a game he was playing. That's kind of more how Joe Abercrombie is. But his character says many times, the Bloody Nine says, you cannot have too many knives, and I agree with him. So, but in specifically to CrossFit, as I digress there, you can definitely have too much squatting, getting below parallel. You can definitely have too much hip hinging off the ground. You can have too much of gymnastic pulling. And so that's where the next 3 devil's details after this are rules that help me balance that out. So this is where, if you remember, the first part of devil's details is the initial build. I've gotten the workouts out there using the first 7 or 8 rules it was. The workouts are out there. Now I'm going back through and seeing, are we squatting too much this week? Are we doing too much hanging off the rig? Or are we only squatting once and I need to add one? Are we deadlifting and power cleaning and power snatching, all pulling off the ground, and I need to change one of those movements, maybe to a hang, or maybe to a shoulder to overhead can fit in there, something else. So it's reviewing, and then refining these workouts to make sure we're hitting everything, that there are no gaps, and also nothing that is too repetitive or redundant. So that is pretty much Devil's Details 11, the 2 times a week rule. Guys, in about 24 hours, we will find out what 24.2 is. 24.1 was very emotional, and everybody was going to get to a point in that workout where they were miserable, and then you were going to have to see what happened from that point on. Good luck at 24.2. I will see you guys soon.